everyone. This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today, I'm very, very fortunate to have a guest who I've known for a few months now. I met him at the American Academy of Anti-Aging, which is the quintessential longevity anti-aging show that's held in Las Vegas. And we met in December, three months ago. So welcome, Patrick.
Thanks for having me, Michele. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. And I know you're on my time zone today, our time zone in LA. And I really appreciate you taking the time to get away from your biohacking convention. So, yeah. Patrick, I'm going to give just a little bit of a background for our viewers, but I wanted to say before I get into your bio that I've been looking forward to this conversation since I met you for 3 months, and I've been using your brain tap, which we're going to talk about today. And I have so many questions to ask you because now that I'm a user, obviously so many things generate in your thinking about the brain. So today is going to be everything about the brain, if that's okay with you.
That's great. That's what I love to talk about.
I guess so. You're an expert. You're the expert.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, actually, Patrick, let me ask an open-ended question first. What brought you to this space that you're in now? And what were the steps that were basically the turning points in your journey to become the expert in the brain and to develop a brain tap instrument that is actually winning all kinds of awards? So we could talk about that in a moment, but just give us a little background on you.
Yeah, well, I think I was born for it. I was a very difficult student. I was held back in second grade. And so my brain wasn't functioning right. So my dad, fortunately, he got help with his alcoholism through something called the Silva method, which is a meditation process that actually works to balance the brain using machines called GSR machines, or galvanic skin response systems, which measures the heat in circulation in the hands. This was well before EEG, for those that know about brain scans, and we had to just use these were the things we knew. That's how I started. And then my dad trained me to improve my sports. So I didn't realize that while I was improving my sports, I was going to be improving my brain for other things, and became an honor roll student and got a track scholarship, and never was going to do this. This was just something I was doing with my dad. My dad then became a Silva method instructor. So every other weekend in Michigan, we were going and giving seminars. So I probably sat through a couple hundred of those. And I was going to go to school for electronics, and my dad was doing his thing with psychology and things of that nature. And then it got to the point where I was doing this as a side job, and for about 5 years, and I started to find that I really liked doing it. And so I went back to school, got my degree in psychology, but I still love electronics. So I want to know, how could I take these ancient traditions of really working with the brain? Because, meditation, mindfulness, people know that helps the brain, but it doesn't move the needle as far as your physiology or neurology, however you want to think about that. And because we need to add a little bit more, we need to put a little gas on the fire. And that's where the light, sound, and vibration comes into. When we put those things in concert with it, it's kind of like, when you're at an event and they have the right music, the right environment is there, it makes a big difference. If you go on a date with somebody and you got the right atmosphere and you have a great conversation, then you have a great experience. So what I want to do is create an experience for people with the brain tap. Now, in 1986, we invented the very first one. That one we called the MC Square. And that was one that got an award way back in 1989 as the best new gadget of the Consumer Electronics Show that was in Vegas. So and then if we fast forward up to 2002, our app got the award for the best sleep app at the Consumer Electronics Show, our Sleep RX app. So we're still going there. We're still showing them. We're still pushing the needle on how does technology help our physiology. And for me, it was all about me at first. And then how could I help people that were in the same situation as me, like with ADHD and ADD? And then we found out, hey, we can help people with pain control. We can help people with dementia. We can help people with anxiety disorders and things of that nature. And now we have 3,000 clinics out there helping us to gather data and create the clinical research we need to prove to people that every brain can improve. It's just you have to create the right environment for that to improve. It's kind of like planting a garden. You can have all the best seeds in the world, but if you don't work the environment so those seeds can take root, then you don't get a good garden. The same thing's true with our physiology and our brain work. So that's kind of what started me. And I still feel like I'm just kind of hanging out with my dad, and although he's no longer with us, but I'm doing this because it's something I love to do and I get paid for it. So it's kind of nice too.
Well, they say that if you can find that pearl in the oyster, that what you were brought here to do, and the gift that you have to be able to realize your dreams, which is really an action plan, right? You can't have a dream without having hard work, sweat, perspiration, all that behind it. But the fact that you could find that so early in your life is such a gift, because so many people go through their lives and they never know why was I brought here? What is my passion? What am I supposed to be accomplishing? How am I going to make a difference in the world? And all those things that you've done, Patrick, and you were given that gift. And you should obviously thank your father, even through adversity and his illness. He found an answer, and that it's interesting and ironic and coincidental that I emailed you the other day and asked you about the Silva method, because I had come across some articles and I was curious to know what you thought. So that was just coincidental that you grew up with that, and that's been a life-changing experience to go through the Silva method classes, and how it shaped your father's life and changed him and cured him, and now, of course, and then it helped you and through your challenges. So, well, that's a wonderful story, and I hope people get encouraged when they hear how inspirational it is to find that passion and to be able to then realize your dreams, which is what you're doing every day. And by the way, in doing so, you're helping all these other people. So what a great gift. Patrick, I did have a lot of questions that as we delve into, let's talk everything the brain.
Sure.
My first question is, why is it that the brain has become so much more prevalent in all the media, in all the internet, and just so much more awareness and discussion about the brain? Why do you think that has happened?
Well, there's a couple of factors. Number one is people are living longer. So we're finding the extent of our genetics. When does it start wearing out? And what did our previous experiences in our life do to brain health? So we're finding that out. Unfortunately, a lot of people way too late, and also I think stress. Most people don't understand that chronic low-level stress is probably the biggest factor in why people get dementia and even leads to Alzheimer's, because that stress dysregulates the brain. And in the past, we didn't know that because we didn't have technology to measure it. Now we can measure the brain, we can see what's going on over time, and we can also see, is this technique that we're talking about, does that actually improve over time? Does the brain improve? And we're finding that it does, if you're doing certain techniques like light, sound, and vibration, and proper foods that you eat, and exercise and movement. There's a lot of things we can do to improve the brain. And we have a formula that's been proven in science. And when it wasn't, when you think about it, before 2000, everyone thought the brain couldn't change. And now there's something called neuroplasticity that's just all the rage. And that neuroplasticity means the brain is able to change at any point in time in your life.
Right. And that the brain is a muscle, and it is like going to the gym to work out your other muscles, that you're working out your brain muscle, that people never really considered the brain in that way, right?
That's right. Yeah. They just thought, hey, the brain wears down like a knife blade. And now we know, hey, that might be true, but we can sharpen that knife. We can do different physiological exercises and breathing techniques, and there's different ways to keep the brain in its peak level, because the brain, like the liver, it can rebuild itself.
Mm-hmm.
They used to say the only organ that rebuilt itself was the liver, but now we know the brain does as well.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Water and Wellness. Water and Wellness is one of the best companies to find purified water. They have a countertop system that I use, and I travel with it all the time. So I would highly recommend you look at that. If you use the Ageless code, you'll get a 10% discount. waterandwellness.com/pages/Ageless and Timeless. That's how you can order to get the discount. So visit waterandwellness.com or call 877-296-6880 to learn how to take control of your drinking water and learn about all those natural additives to optimize your health and longevity.
And when you mention neuroplasticity, I think most people don't know that term, but I think that's becoming more understood these days, that really it's the capacity of the brain to work, right? It's the energy, the energy of the brain, and dovetailing on what you just said, that the brain is able to regenerate itself, and it doesn't have to be that you have a sentence of some kind of dementia or Alzheimer's in your future, because you can regenerate your DNA in the brain. You can do the things that you just mentioned that are integrative, like your diet and your stress levels and so forth. Meditation, the brain tap, of course, that helps people to regenerate the organ that they thought was going to just deteriorate over time. So this is mind blowing, really. For all of us. So how can we prevent dementia and Alzheimer's? Because this has become, I think, one of the biggest epidemics of our times. And you know what, I'm old enough to remember that when I was growing up, I never heard those terms.
Right. It's a relatively new, it's a very new disorder. When you think about ancient traditions, they didn't keep the wisdom of the tribe with the young people. They kept it with the elders. So that tells us that there's a lifestyle problem, that we're having problems with that. So the first thing people need to do, of course, I'm going to talk about brain tap, but the first thing is your diet. You have to feed your brain. We're in a totally different lifestyle now. We used to feed our bodies because we were farmers, and we'd be out there working all day. And so we had a lot of high carb diet and things of that nature. Unfortunately, that actually robs your brain of energy, because your brain needs essential fats, good fats, omega-3s primarily. So, and there's other things like eating blueberries and, different things, but we need to feed our brain. Number two, we need to be moving and breathing. They say that now sitting is the new smoking. That's because our nervous system is more of a nervous system of action. It's not a nervous system of sedentariness. When we're sedentary, the nervous system, and that's really part of the brain, because 70% of your nervous system is between your ears. So when you think about, when I'm talking about nervous system, I'm including the brain in that. And I'm including all three brains, from the heart brain to the gut brain. So all of these, and it's all about communication. So when you're not moving, but you have stress, like for instance, on the computer, you're working on the computer or playing a computer game, your brain doesn't discern if that's real or imagined. So, but you're not moving, but your brain thinks you're doing all these different things, and, you're having all these threats and attacks. And so the one thing to do is to eat right, get up and move, or stand throughout the day instead of sitting, and then do some kind of brain fitness. And that's where, brain tap comes in, or doing some kind of breath work, or doing Tai Chi or yoga or dancing. Physical exercise actually works out the brain as well.
Well, you just said something very important, the gut, the heart, and the brain axis, and the microbiome of each, and how they're integrated. So the other hot topic these days, and all throughout the show in Vegas, as you saw, there was so much on the microbiome. However, the microbiome is usually referred to in the gut only, but and you just said how these three are integrated. So can you talk for a moment about, just go through some of the concepts of good nutrition that can help the gut, but will also then help your brain fitness?
Right. Number one, if you have to make sure you're the body type that can do it. But if you can do intermittent fasting, that's really good for the brain. It creates something called autophagy. So it clears out those what they call zombie cells and things like that are just messing with the system. But as far as food goes, really, I like what they call the 40-30-30 diet, where it's 40% protein, 30% fats, and then 30% carbs. And this seems to be the right balance. But the reality is, if you're really confused, just watch an old episode of I Love Lucy. When Ethel and Lucy are at the fountain having a lunch, you don't see a big burger and a big gulp.
Mm-hmm.
What you see is a half a sandwich and a little tumbler of soda. Now, I don't drink soda myself, but I mean, your body can handle anything in moderation. The problem is that the toxic load from the foods that most people are consuming, and the number one culprit is sugar. So sugar is the death kill to the brain. So just start eliminating sugar in all the places you can, and start increasing the good fats. With a lot of people were afraid because we went through this fat phobia stage as Americans, from the really the 90s into the early 2000s. And then they realized, hey, we need that fat because our brains are suffering. Our brains suffer when we don't get the right fat, because then we get too much inflammation. And so number two,
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. Number two.
I was going to say number two, we need to move and breathe. A lot of people do yoga nowadays, but what they don't know is that yoga was all designed to get the person ready for meditation. So a lot of people do all that great yoga, but then they jump up and they leave the yoga studio without doing their yoga nidra. That's the part that gives the neuroplasticity. The yoga itself doesn't do as much, because that's stressful for the body. It's in the recovery phase that your brain reorganizes itself. So it's really important that whether we do Tai Chi yoga or just close the windows and doors, turn the music up and dance, our body needs to move. In fact, there was a guy named Al Carter who really was famous for out the mini tramp that everybody started selling at all these stores all over, because it moves the lymphatic system. And he said that babies should be born with a sticker on their forehead that says "Shake well" before opening, because our body we need to move and breathe to get our lymphatic system moving. And that includes our brain. So when we're doing that, our brain has something called the glial lymphomic system, but they now know, before 2015, you didn't even know, you can't go back in time and find any medical literature about the glial lymphomic system before 2015, because they didn't realize it until they had the instruments that showed that it turns on during level 4 sleep. So, but if you're too stressed out, you don't ever reach level 4 sleep. So it's really key. And part of that movement is we need periods of high intense effort, and then we need times of low total recharge relaxation, because that helps with something called heart rate variability. And this is what they now know is we have the electrical system, which is the brain between our ears, but we have the magnetic system, which is our heart, which is much more powerful and actually can be registered up to 18 feet away from a person. So, but these two organizing fields, which now NIH calls the biofield, so they're starting to get more into energy medicine, just because we have to take into account every part of our physiology, our psychology, and also this quantum part of our nature. They don't really know how the brain works still. So that's where the brain fitness comes in. But if you're not eating right and you're not moving and breathing, each one of these can help you, with your longevity and with your health. But when you put these three together and you add in the brain fitness part, what happens is you get this synergy effect. It's not 1 + 1 + 1 is 3. It's 1 + 1 + 1 is 9. Because the body goes to a super state and starts to heal you.
Yeah, so it's a gestalt.
Yes.
1 + 1 does not equal 3 in a gestalt, right? It's greater. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. But so does that explanation help people to understand why Alzheimer's and dementia are such epidemics in our world today, and weren't even words in our vocabulary 50 years ago?
Well, there's one of the biggest problems is the medication that's out there that strips the body of its fats in the bloodstream. because there's a big misnomer about cholesterol. And so they put people on this cholesterol lowering drug, and
Right.
it strips out. Your brain is almost all fat.
Right. That's a very good point.
So, fortunately, when you're taking statins, you are clearing out the fats. So it's crazy because everybody seems to be on them, and there's also been a big rise in neuropathy, because the myelin sheath that basically protects us from getting painful reactions to our nervous system, that's no longer present because that's made out of fat. So our body is being stripped of it. And here's the real problem, is they're checking the cholesterol from the bloodstream, but the problem people have is in the capillaries. So there was a study done with peanut oil, and peanut oil became all the rage because they did this study with monkeys, and they showed that there's none of this peanut oil in their bloodstream. They thought, wow, we found this magical oil, but every monkey in the study died within a year of that study. And what they found out when they did when they basically cut them open, found out what happened is all that fat got deposited in their capillaries. This is why I believe every person on earth should be taking a low dose of niacin or B3, because that niacin in the flush will help to keep the capillaries clear of the fats that clogging up the system.
It's interesting that you're talking about this because Dr. Graham Simpson, who's going to be a guest on my podcast in a couple of weeks, but I was reading his new book, and he mentions you and that you've been friends for a long time. You know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Graham Simpson. So he talks about cholesterol as one of the greatest hoaxes of all time, because people, these people pushing the pharmaceutical industry, pushing statin drugs, but people don't really understand that cholesterol is not bad. Cholesterol is actually good if it's the good cholesterol. And it is, what you just said, it is the highest percentages in the brain. And the liver needs the cholesterol. However, it's just gotten such a bad rap, and they do it so it's so simplistic instead of scientific. And people
they're looking at the body like it's a automobile, and that all you have to do is change out the spark plug or change the catalytic converter. And the problem is that your body is like beads on a string. You pull on one string, and it basically everything's connected. There's no disconnection from your adrenal function to your vagus nerve stimulation. And what's the problem is now is our medical field has become so specialized. They've become really, for lack of a better word, ignorant about how the whole system works. The system works as a whole. It doesn't work, nerve work, our physiology. There's so much that they just jump on one thing or another. And I think it's good to have specialists, but they've got to be educated in how it all works, and not just take one piece of data and go off. And, the drug companies are just looking for, hey, we've got this short-term study. It shows that we took cholesterol out of the bloodstream, but then the only test is on the American public or the world. America takes like 90% of the drugs in the world. So, what happens is we're going to find there's a lot of movies out there like Stanton Nation that people can watch. And I mean, a lot of people don't realize that cholesterol is like a fire department, and it's putting down this coat so you don't get inflammation. As soon as you clear out the cholesterol, your inflammation goes through the roof.
Right. And you need to have your doctor be informed by you. Sometimes they don't offer this, but they need to do the blood testing that is breaking down into the good cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, the apolipoprotein A and B, and all the things that will show you whether you are even measuring your carotid artery. Just to basically see whether you have what you just mentioned, which is the capillaries, and the arteries being filled with the bad cholesterol. That's where heart attacks occur, not your absolute cholesterol. And the brain, as you said, is mostly fat. So if you rob the body of absolute cholesterol, you're taking away the nutrition of the brain, as you pointed out. So, Patrick, talk about, if you would, the different brain states. I think people, get confused. So, the alpha, the beta. Would you go through each one and just tell us what each one is?
Yeah, when we think about now, we need every brainwave. There's no like villain brainwave. It's really, think of it as state-dependent brainwaves. So I always tell people your brainwaves are like healing Wi-Fi systems. If we don't have those, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what they are doing to the body, but let's start with beta, where we're talking right now. And this means our prevailing awareness is in beta. This is where we're awake, we're functioning, we can interact and react to situations. It's also, the beta brain is the only brain state where you feel pain. So the more stressed you are, the more anxious you are, the more your pain amplifies. So in order to get people out of pain, we need to drop them out of beta and get them into more of an alpha state. Alpha, most everybody who's going to be listening to this has been in alpha before. Go ahead.
Interrupt you for 1 second. This was a question that came to mind. So in the beta state, that's the thinking. That's your thinking state, and that is where you would have your fear and anxiety and frustrations and all. So that's the state that you really don't want to be in. Like when they say I'm overthinking something, that would be the beta.
Yeah, if you have more than 45% of your brain in beta, because it's a mixture of brain waves that are happening all the time. But if you have more than 45%, you will get over anxious, also overtired. At the end of the day, you'll just be exhausted. You won't even be able to watch a television program or something. You sit on the couch, you pass out. So as the body and mind work together, what happens is the best brainwave state, and then I'll go through them all just so we kind of get the whole brainwave scene out there. 45% beta, 30% alpha, and about 10% theta, and then the rest is split between delta and gamma. And then I'll talk about why we have to have that mixture. We call it a full spectrum brainwave. And if we're missing, for instance, let's say that you have not enough beta and you have, let's say you have 45% alpha and 30% beta. Now you're going to have a attention deficit with hyperactive tendencies. I see that brain profile all the time. So we would have to train their brain to, now, if you're a creative person or you're in an art class or you're in a creative problem solving, that might be the right brain state for you. Because you're in you create kind of a field of infinite possibility because your brain is kind of wide open, because the alpha state is that daydreaming state. And that's why they say that Einstein functioned mostly in 10 hertz, which is alpha. And he was fond of saying that, that's why time is only really fixed in beta. When you get into alpha, time is suspended. And Einstein's very, very famous quote is, when you're around a beautiful woman for an hour, it seems like a minute. If you're sitting in a hot stove for a minute, it seems like an hour.
Right. So it puts you outside of time. Alpha state puts you outside of time. Okay, timeless.
Okay.
That's the name of my podcast, Ageless and Timeless. So I guess part of my podcast is in the alpha state, right?
That's right. Well, and you want to get into the alpha state as much as possible that you can, because that's when your body liberates and starts turning on the parasympathetic system. The sympathetic system, which is your fight or flight, is activated by beta. That's where your reticular activating system resides, that primitive part of our brain that keeps us safe and is always observing our environment and saying, hey, am I okay here? Am I all right to move forward? It's also that critical part of our nature. When we get into alpha, that criticism kind of goes away and you're in this. I tell people that think of beta brain as like the lawyers and the alpha brain is like the California surfers. That's the difference. So we need to have both of them. Now, when we get to theta, this is a place that very few people are able to get to in meditation, even though if you went on the internet, you think everybody's getting to theta. I can tell you, after scanning 30,000 brains over the last 10 years, I can count on one hand how many people who meditate without brain tap get to theta. They all think they are, but it's a very small brainwave. It's a very small bandwidth from 7 to 4 hertz. And it's something that we move through in the morning and at night, usually when we're going to bed, unless you're practicing some kind of meditation or mindfulness or using brain tap. Now, theta, we call this the inventive mind, Because when I was doing my research for my first book, which was called Awaken the Genius, I noticed that almost every inventor, and I think now I could probably say every inventor had some strategy that when they didn't have a solution to a problem in their lab, they would go into an altered state and they would come up with a solution, whether it was to, like they say that Edison would take a cat nap with a fork in his hand and a pan underneath it, and he would go to sleep with a problem, and when the spoon or the fork hit the pan, the solution would come into his mind. And he got that idea from jet fighters during World War II, or airplane fight. They didn't have jets back then, but they would basically, they told him that they could sleep as long as they wanted, as long as they could hold on to the spoon. So they were getting these guys, they were getting them to believe that they got all the sleep they needed, but it was only sometimes 45 minutes or an hour. And so then when you get into Delta, Delta is the also a timeless place. All the states below Alpha, Theta, but Delta is a truly timeless place. Most people out there have had a dream and they felt like they were trapped in that dream. And then when their dream was over, they woke up and they said, I'm glad that was a dream. I can't believe that was happening. The reality is that the average dream lasts 7 seconds. So how many dreams do we have at night? There could be literally hundreds, if not thousands, dreams. You could even have a whole life experience in your dreams, and it might only take 5 or 10 minutes. So in the process of, that's also when you get that deep cycle, you have to get that level 4 sleep. So if anyone out there has ever been sleeping and they woke up, but they had sleep paralysis, you were in deep level 4 sleep. Because what happens during that level of sleep, the brain literally goes offline. And that's when the glial lymphomic system activates. So I tell people, think of Henry Ford and you're making Model Ts and you need to clean the line. You're not going to have them working while you're cleaning the line. The line's going to shut down. You're going to clean the line. Then you're going to go back to work. That's the way the brain works. And so usually this happens 7 or 8 times while you're sleeping. That's why if you're using something like the Aura Ring or the BioStrap or any of these other whoops, you'll see if you're tracking your score, see that the sleep is more like a wave. It's not like you drop down into Delta and stay there for 4 hours. And then those 4 have really been the ones that most people think about. But there's a lot more. But the one that's really coming on strong now because of dementia and Alzheimer's, which we were talking about, is gamma. And gamma is the bass drum of the brain. So when gamma gets dysregulated, we should have anywhere between 3 to 7% gamma activity. Most people we scan have 0. It's not even there. And so that's one of the reasons why the brain just gets dysregulated. So once the brain gets in that bass drum gets in there, it's kind of like having a marching band. If we didn't have that bass drum keeping the cadence, the band would get all out of tune. The same is true with the brain. So that's why studies like at MIT, and when I went there, when they were doing the study on the blue light therapy at 40 hertz, I basically went there and showed them the brain tap. And I'm really upset that we didn't have them sign a non-disclosure because they actually came up with a headset that flashes at 40 hertz frequency. We do the same thing with brain tap, but we thought of it first. But they actually proved that blue light flashing at 40 hertz frequency. The thing that we proved was you can't just keep at 40 hertz frequency. Ours can go up to as high as 85 cycles per second. So we need to train the brain to have these really super states where the brain clears out the neural function, and then you return back to, let's say, normal time, for lack of a better word, and then you're able to process your day-to-day activity with more energy.
Is the gamma where taking acetylcholine and GABA would be the most beneficial?
Yeah, your brain, each of these brain waves, by the way, is triggering your gut to make these neurotransmitters. 95% are made in the gut or more. So when we're in alpha, our brain is the primary one the brain starts to make is acetylcholine. When we're in theta, it's GABA, and GABA is a precursor to DMT. So when you think about people having spiritual experiences when they're in these deep states or in these gamma states like the Buddhist adepts, that's because their brain is teeming with these neurotransmitters, because the brain is the most powerful pharmacy on earth. It can dispense 30,000 different neurochemicals. So when, of course, a lot of people just think of delta and serotonin, but the biggest reason we have beta is the problem is dopamine. There's even a book called Dopamine Nation, because
Right.
that most people don't know that dopamine is triggered not by the act of doing something. So when somebody has an addiction, it's not the addiction that's causing the dopamine. It's the thought about the addiction that's creating the dopamine. And that's
Mm,
why they can never, it never satisfies them.
mm,
I tell people when I was in college, we'd all, us guys would all get dressed up. We're going to go out and do our thing. And then we get to the nightclub and it's never as fun as it was while we were thinking about it in our head.
mhm,
And that happens to the addict, because it's a thought of what you're going to, it's the anticipation of the
mhm.
excitement that does it, not the excitement itself.
So just for a moment, let's talk about the neurotransmitters. They're very important, I think, in our world, in our very toxic world today, that people understand that there are ways to generate good feelings, and that is a biochemical, as well as spiritual, emotional, physical. But this neurotransmitters really are the focus for generating well, as you said, serotonin, dopamine, and all epinephrine. So why don't you talk for a moment about how they all work and how we can tap into that if we want to start feeling more positive about the experience we're having in the world?
Right. I'll talk first about how we would do it in traditional ancient times, because what we've done is we've taken what they did in ancient traditions, we've made this modern technology called brain tap. So whether you have the brain tap or not, one of the ways in Japan, they call it forest bathing, and that basically just taking a walk out in nature, because
Mm,
nature actually has a resonant frequency of about 10 hertz. That's
mm,
alpha. So whether you're sitting by the ocean or taking a walk in the woods, your body syncs to that, because every gene pair and every
mm,
DNA pair is always changing, actually at a rate of every 40 seconds.
mm,
Every DNA pair in your body is changing based on where you're at in the universe. So
mm,
what foods have you eaten? What people have you talked to? What are you thinking? What
mm,
are you doing? Your body is constantly changing. That's why I tell people, when you think about neurotransmitter production and what's going on, your body doesn't want the neurotransmitters from this morning right now. It wants the neurotransmitters of the moment. So think of your body more like a river. When I look at a river, people go, that's the Mississippi River. And I'll say, well, that's this moment's Mississippi River, because the water that was there this morning is now downstream. So a lot of people are looking at the downstream functioning of the body. And the reality is that our body works best in a flow state.
mm,
What I mean by that is, when what we need at the moment, we adjust, amplify, and then project out into our world, our reality. So as we work with that, that's why so many people are talking about being in the moment. So today we're under so much stress. The average person looks at their phone over 300 times a day.
mm,
We did a study in our clinic, our research facility, where we put a person's phone in another room. They could not hear it. We silenced it, and we had them hooked up to EEG. Every time they got a notification, their brain, they had a cortical response in their reptilian brain, which means that their brain was hearing it or being signaled by it, almost like a quantum entanglement, even though they couldn't hear it, they couldn't see it, they didn't even know what was going on, but their body
mm,
knew it. It's kind of like when there's a lot of research now going on about how do people know, like, how do you know when somebody's looking at you? You're sitting there and you have this feeling like somebody's looking at you, then you turn and they are. you know that's because we are connected. There's no disconnection here. And when our brain's operating at its highest level of efficiency, we're processing more data. So we process a lot of data, but what happens is we isolate it and we remove it from our conscious awareness, because it's too much information at any one time. uh, just as a a couple fun facts for people. Our eyes process about 2,000 pieces of information every second, but our eyes send to our brain over 10 million pieces of information.
mm,
So as a neuroscientist, we'd say, you're making this all up.
mm,
And one of the big examples they have is, when you can't find the salt shaker in the kitchen, but somebody who's, you're with says it's right there on the counter, and you said, no, it's not. Then they walk out and there it is. It's
mhm,
because they say we only render about 20% of our world. I mean, we render 100%, but we only really process or see 20%. Hearing everyone is hearing about 25,000 pieces of information every second, but we only process about 2,000 pieces of information.
So
our hearing is really
what you're saying, Patrick, sorry to interrupt, but what you're saying is that just like when you're in the gym, if you're trying to exercise muscles, but you're not getting to the level of actual change in your muscle fitness, because you're doing the same thing, but it's not getting you the improved results. Is that similar
right.
to?
Yes. Yeah. So we want to, that's why when you do these mindfulness exercises or brain tap, you're silencing all of this information and you're letting the brain take really a brain break so that it can reassess. At night, this is the most powerful time for the hippocampus, because at night when we go to sleep, the hippocampus, one of its main jobs is to process things that we've seen, heard, and experienced during the day, sort, organize, and put them into perspective. So if we need them in the future, we can recall them. But if we all know that under stress, we don't have the same memory as we do when we're relaxed and comfortable. Mm-hmm. That's because of blood flow and circulation decreases in the hippocampus under stress, fear, anxiety. And, if we think about the last 3 years, most people are just waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're not anticipating the world getting better. Unfortunately, most people are anticipating the world getting worse. I think that we need to look at the world more, that we have something called the psychoimmunology factor, meaning that our thoughts actually either improve our immunology. The world is a series of threats. Our immune system shuts down. If we look at the world as a series of challenges, it bolsters the immune system and functions better. So we have to kind of change. And that's why having an optimistic view of the world is much better than having a pessimistic view of the world.
And that's why when Napoleon Hill said, well, what you believe you can achieve, or what you think about, you'll bring about, those are very accurate statements and perceptive statements for what you're talking about, because that is looking at I hate to say the old adage, but to me, the glass should be overflowing, not half full.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody said, you're missing the point. The glass is refillable.
Yeah, right. That too. Well, what is the? Let's go through for a moment, because our time is going to run out, and I knew this would happen. But if you just for a moment go through the neuro, the para, and the sympathetic nervous system, so people understand that whole autonomic nervous system regulation. That I know you did that test when we were at the show, and I would like to spend a moment on that too. But can you just go through and define each of those nervous system states?
Yeah. So when we're relaxed and comfortable, we're around people that we love and they give us a lot of leeway. Typically, we're in a state called the parasympathetic system. That's the rest, relax, digest system. And we should be a third of that. We should be, like, if we're on idle, we're in neutral, we should have about a third of our nervous system functioning in that realm. These are called, they measure them by high frequency waves, low frequency waves, and ultra high frequency waves. So our body can register these through our heart, because our heart is actually the one. Think of the heart also as the conductor. It's actually telling the nervous system what to do. That's why there's more heart attacks on Monday morning than any other day of the week, because people don't have their heart in their job. So, but most people get triggered, which means stressful events happen and it shuts down their nervous system, because the sympathetic system, that's the fight or flight system, comes online. Now, before the fight or flight system, there's the freeze system. Every animal plays possum. And if we do that enough, what happens is it interrupts the system. So if you get enough interruptions, the brain or the body will start to think that's normal. So we want to be in a flow state. So there's the third system of the body. It's called the neurohormonal system. And this is really, we're talking about the adrenals, our physiology. Most people, unfortunately, regulate their nervous system through their biological system, which means they drink coffee to wake up in the morning. They take something to go to sleep. They, in the middle of the afternoon, when they should be doing a brain tap session or doing a mindfulness exercise at 2:00 in the afternoon, they have a cup of coffee or tea. And these are all times that when we use the biological system, it's okay to do that occasionally, but think of that system like your backup generator. So you want to, if you use your backup generator all the time and then a real storm happens, you're not going to have the fuel to get you through that storm. So that's what happened to a lot of people during the years of 2020 and 2021. They didn't have a backup system. They were already maxed out. So, but when these three are regulating, I love the statement that Mike Tyson said: everybody has a plan till they get hit.
Right.
Your nervous system should be able to get hit. For instance, if you're one of the people that, let's say you're driving through town, somebody cuts you off, it's okay to get upset. I mean, that was a life-threatening experience, but if you're still talking about it 4 or 5 hours later, you probably have a dysregulated nervous system, because we should get over it. I love what Paramahansa Yogananda said in his book, Autobiography of a Yogi. He says, the difference between children and adults is children will get upset, angry, and get over it. Parents will talk about what the children were getting angry about for 3 or 4 days. So we need to get rid of the negative and just focus on that positive.
Right. Let it go. Right.
Yes.
I love that expression. Just get over it. Well, I want to be sure that I know I maybe didn't let you answer that whole question, but I want to be sure that we talk about the brain tap. So give us an elevator 3,000 feet above sea level, let's say. Just give us a little bit of an overview of the brain tap and what people can do to access and use the brain tap to improve their brain energy.
Okay. So we've known for a long time, actually since the 1800s, that sound can affect the brain. They didn't know what it was doing, but they knew that the brain would balance, and they called these things binaural beats. So that means we would put a frequency of different durations into the ear. Let's say 300 hertz in one ear, 310 in the other. It doesn't have to be those specific, but this is an example. The brain hears a phantom sound. Well, this is the first step. When I first got involved with light and sound research, we wanted to see how we balance the brain. And then we did it with light. So you think about the eyes and the ocular system. There's a lot of research out there for retinal flashing. Your eyes have more mitochondria per square inch than any other part of the body. Now, the brain has the most mitochondria, but the eyes actually absorb light and transmit light. So what happens is, if we want to get light into the brain, the eyes are one of the best ways. But your eyes are closed when you're doing with brain tap, because you don't need a lot of light to make this happen. And we use 470 nanometer light. And in our studies, especially our sleep studies, we have shown, like with coal miners in Australia, that they had a 70% improvement in sleep in 3 weeks by using brain tap right before they went to bed. And then, so what we did over time is we found, how can we enhance this experience? So we added the ear lights. A lot of people go, what do you have lights in the ears for? Well, the best way to deliver energy to the brain is not only through the eyes, but through the ears, because all the blood in the body passes through the ears. So we can, in the way photobiomodulation works, is the red blood cells absorb the light energy, and it circulates through the body till it finds a cell that is dying, what they call apoptosis. And then if the energy can get there before the cell dies, that cell will actually absorb that energy, and the Krebs cycle that starts up the cell will come up again. They actually, when you think about Ageless and Timeless, they have proven that the cells, if we can give the cells the right energy in the form of light, sound, and vibration, and we can detox those cells, there's no reason that a cell can't stay alive forever. The only reason or it doesn't get the toxins consistently. So with brain tap, what we're doing is, you're going to put this on, we're going to isolate light, sound, and vibration. So we're taking the senses of the brain and we're teleporting them from just sitting in a chair, relaxing, to a frequency response. So the brain doesn't know the difference between being next to that body of water, that ocean, or that river, or that stream, or walking out in nature, than listening to a brain tap session, because the brain only interprets light, sound, and vibration. So we're giving it the same frequency response as if it was going on a forest walk, but you're laying there relaxing. So the brain gets the same benefits of a deep, powerful sleep, what we call a power nap, in as little as 10 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes, and the brain reboots at that point. And once the brain reboots, then the nervous system can regulate again and balance out the brain. So there's a lot of different exercises, but that's from 30,000 foot. And, it's one of those things, once you experience it over time, you'll really start to feel the benefits. Even if you're not using the headset, you can just use the app. People have the same group in Australia we had half of them doing just the app, and it took them 6 weeks to get to the same place. So you can do it with the app alone, or you can supercharge it with the headset.
Well, not to be promoting the more expensive option, but I can say from the firsthand experience that when I tried the app first, it didn't do for me what the headset does. And I think it is the light, the blue light, that is, I think I'm just a tougher case, because my brain is always, my energy in my brain is very high, and it doesn't relax, it has a lot, and probably has a lot of stress for, all the challenges. So when I got with the headset, and the lights just help to basically turn down everything and help you to relax and de-stress. I don't know if you've had that same feedback from other executives, but I think that was my experience anyway. So if anyone is same as me, where they're very go and alpha type, and they have a hard time getting their brain to slow down, I think the headset, which is what, 647, is that what the price is today?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
yes.
To me, it's worth it to invest if you are looking at the both options. The app only is, a subscription fee per month, and you can use your Bluetooth. But honestly, being really, really transparent here, I just didn't feel, when I got the headset, it was like a world of difference.
Yeah. Well, they say all unhappiness stems from unfavorable comparisons. So you got to compare the two. When the people that are getting results don't know about the headset, it's kind of like back in the time of the pioneers, they thought a wagon train was the fastest way to get across the country. Luckily, I flew on an airplane to California from North Carolina. So I think the headset's like taking a rocket ship rather than, we've actually proved in India, where we were measuring gurus' brains, that we could get anyone to have the same brain profile as a guru. Now, they're not going to the same place. I don't want to make that claim, but the brain's physiological state could be in the same deep, relaxing state as a guru in as little as 3 sessions.
Well, I think your statement at the very beginning was that stress is probably the biggest challenge. I was going to ask you how you're, scientifically, how you're going to take that challenge. Like you say, you're going to cure, what was it, a billion brains, on a mission to better a billion brains. That was your mission statement.
Yep.
And I was thinking when I read that, figure out how we can decrease the amount of stress in people's lives, because particularly over the last couple of years with the pandemic, that you really tested all the theses that you have, I'm sure, in your brain tap, and how you probably, that challenge is actually a great opportunity for you, and you probably had a lot more people coming to you because they needed help. They need help, but so just in that subject of the billion brains at a time, the mission statement, what are the biggest challenges facing you in that quest?
Well, the biggest thing is there's a statement that says, spirit is simple, but man is complex. It's a simple solution. And most people they oversimplify even the simple solution, and they don't understand that over time, it's not a one and done thing. It's about, how do we do it? It's kind of like going to the gym. If you go to the gym once, you're not going to build any muscles. So you've got to go over and over again over time and form a lifestyle habit. And I think we're in a better place today than we've ever been. I mean, in the 80s, people looked at us like we were from another planet, and they didn't believe anything that we had. Now we have the science that backs it up, and we can actually measure it with people, like you saw at the A4M. And people, that makes a big difference when you can actually show them some science.
Right. Well, on that positive note, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I wish we had another hour, because there's so many more things that we could delve into. However, there'll be hopefully another opportunity to have you back. And I did want to say a big thank you for allowing me to experientially be, a user before I did this podcast, because it really helps me to be far more clear about what the benefits and even the drawbacks. I mean, there were no drawbacks for me. I was completely compliant. I loved it.
Yeah.
I still use it, but I've been traveling, so it's difficult to take maybe some people do, but I was finding that a little bit of a challenge when you travel to have the headset. But I did want to give you a compliment and say, you send it in a beautiful packaging. The directions are very clear. The support online is very helpful. The customer service is impeccable. There's just so many things that I could say as an advocate. But I did want you to know, as the founder, that there's a big fan right here in California, in San Francisco, who got to try this and will continue to use it. So
that's great. Yeah, I'll be available again when we can do it. Once you use it for a while more, well, let's get on the phone and answer the rest of those questions, maybe in a month or two or something.
I would love that, Patrick. Thank you so much. Okay, well, I want to let our viewers know that we are now on Muscle and Fitness, if you haven't been following that. So in addition to United Broadcasting Network, which is one of the oldest podcast companies in America, and that's where we started and launched our podcast. But now we broadened that, and so the awareness is much larger as well. Even though we are distributed to all the major podcast sites, we are now part of the Muscle and Fitness family. So if you go to Muscle and Fitness Plus, online, you'll see the anti-aging category. If you scroll down, you'll see Ageless and Timeless. So don't forget to subscribe if you like what you've heard, or push the like button, which will tell us anything feedback that you have. Please send me an email or call me if you like. My email is the Michele Hughes Company @gmail.com, and Michele is one L. And my phone number is 808-639-0904. I'm happy to speak with you. And actually, Patrick, I know you were going to offer our viewers some kind of a consideration, and we've just run out of time. So if I could have your office, just tell me what that is. I'll put it on my Michele Recommends on my website.
Sure. Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Good. I'm so sorry that we ran out of time, but I want to thank you again and tell everybody to have a beautiful weekend and enjoy this nice weather we're finally having in California, Patrick, while you're visiting us.
Yes. Yeah, it looks beautiful. So, all right. Thank you, Michele. We look forward to seeing you again live when we can, and then we'll get on one of these Zooms again and answer some more questions as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye, Patrick.